I never expected my greatest professional achievement would begin with being fired. That morning, when the door to my office burst open and my boss's son stormed in with his father right behind him, I felt my stomach drop. The accusation came fast and furious. "She's been meeting with our competitors. Fire her!" he shouted, pointing at me. 1 hour later, I sat across from my boss of 8 years as he said, "Christina, we have to let you go." I didn't argue. They had no idea I was actually meeting with patent lawyers who were already protecting the technology they were trying to steal from me. My journey at TechVision Industries began 8 years ago when I joined their Boston office as a fresh-faced engineer straight out of MIT. I was 26, ambitious, and eager to prove myself in the competitive tech industry. The company specialized in software solutions for manufacturing processes, not exactly glamorous work, but it was cutting-edge and challenging. Thomas Jackson, the founder and CEO, took an interest in me after I improved one of their core algorithms during my first year. "You have a natural talent for seeing patterns others miss," he told me during a company dinner. That small moment of recognition set the tone for our professional relationship. Thomas became something of a mentor, guiding my career as I rose from entry-level engineer to project lead and eventually to heading my own small research and development team by my 5th year. I respected Thomas immensely. In his early 60s, he had that rare combination of technical brilliance and business acumen that had built TechVision from a garage startup to a company of 300 employees. His salt and pepper hair and calm demeanor gave him a trustworthy appearance that clients and employees alike responded to. He was tough but fair, demanding excellence, but also rewarding it generously. That's why the change in our dynamic was so subtle at first that I barely noticed it. It started around the time that Thomas's son Ethan joined the company. Ethan was 34, freshly minted with an MBA from Wharton, with no technical background to speak of. Unlike his father's measured approach, Ethan had a brash confidence that bordered on arrogance. While Thomas had built his success on technical innovation, Ethan seemed more concerned with appearances, networking, and rapid growth. "My father built a solid company," he told me during our first meeting, "but it's time to take TechVision to the next level." The implication was clear. Thomas was old school, and Ethan was the future. Despite my reservations about Ethan, my work at TechVision was reaching an exciting breakthrough. For the past 18 months, my small team and I had been developing a new adaptive optimization algorithm that could revolutionize how manufacturing systems responded to unexpected changes or disruptions. The potential applications were enormous, from supply chain management to energy grid optimization. The night I finally solved the core processing issue that had been holding us back, I could barely contain my excitement. I ran the simulation over and over, watching as the system adapted to increasingly complex variables without faltering. This wasn't just an improvement on existing technology, this was potentially industry-changing. The next morning, I requested a private meeting with Thomas to share the breakthrough. His eyes lit up as I walked him through the algorithm and its potential applications. "This is extraordinary, Christina," he said, genuine pride in his voice. "This could transform our entire product line. I want you to prepare a presentation for the board next month. This deserves their full attention." I left Thomas's office feeling like I was walking on air. 8 years of hard work was about to culminate in the biggest moment of my career. As I turned the corner back toward my department, I caught a glimpse of Ethan standing near his father's office door. He quickly straightened and nodded at me, but something in his expression made me uneasy. Had he been listening to our conversation? I dismissed the thought as paranoia and kept walking, too excited about my breakthrough to worry about office politics. I didn't know it then, but that fleeting moment would be the first sign of the betrayal that was about to unfold. 2 weeks after sharing my breakthrough with Thomas, I noticed the first red flag. I arrived early one morning to find the access logs on our secure development server showed someone had been viewing my project files at 11:30 the previous night. All project leads received automatic notifications of after-hours access to their files, a security measure implemented after a competitor had tried to poach one of our developers last year. I frowned at the notification. The access had been authorized, using credentials with appropriate clearance, but none of my team would have been working that late without telling me. I made a mental note to ask Thomas about it during our weekly check-in. Before I could bring it up, Mark from IT stopped by my desk that afternoon. "Hey, Christina. Just wanted to let you know I helped Ethan with access to the R&D server last night. He said he needed to review some project files for a report he's preparing for Thomas." A knot formed in my stomach. Did he mention which projects specifically? Mark shrugged. He had a list, but I didn't pay much attention. He has executive access, so I just showed him how to navigate the system. Seemed particularly interested in your adaptive optimization stuff. I thanked Mark and tried to quell my growing uneasiness. There could be innocent explanations. Perhaps Thomas had asked Ethan to review the project from a business perspective before the board presentation. 2 days later, an all-staff email arrived that made the knot in my stomach tighten further. Thomas announced a special board meeting in 3 weeks where Ethan Jackson will present a groundbreaking new initiative that promises to reshape our company's future. The timing was too close to my scheduled presentation to be coincidence. During lunch, I overheard 2 marketing team members discussing preparations for the announcement. "Ethan says this new technology is going to put us years ahead of the competition," one said excitedly. "I heard he's been working on it secretly for months," the other replied. "Some kind of adaptive system that can predict and respond to changes in real time." My appetite vanished instantly. That was my technology they were describing, not Ethan's. I needed to talk to Thomas immediately. I caught Thomas as he was leaving for a client meeting that afternoon. "Do you have a minute? I need to talk to you about something important." Thomas checked his watch but nodded. "Walk with me to the elevator." "I'm concerned about Ethan accessing my project files," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, especially since I heard he's presenting some kind of adaptive technology to the board. Thomas's expression hardened slightly. "Christina, Ethan is an executive in this company. He has every right to review ongoing projects. But the technology he's describing sounds exactly like what I've been developing." "I'm sure there's just some confusion in the rumor mill," Thomas said dismissively. "Actually, I think it would be good for you to work more closely with Ethan before your presentation. Help him understand the technical aspects better. He has excellent business instincts that could help position your work properly for the board." The elevator arrived, and Thomas stepped in, effectively ending the conversation. "We'll talk more next week," he said as the doors closed. I returned to my office, my mind racing. Thomas's response felt evasive. Not at all like the straightforward mentor I thought I knew. I pulled out my lab notebook, a habit I'd maintained even as most documentation had gone digital. Flipping through the pages where I'd documented my breakthrough, I froze. 3 pages had been carefully removed. Pages that contained the core conceptual framework of my algorithm. That evening, I stayed late, searching the shared drives for any presentations Ethan might be preparing. In a folder marked Board Presentations, Draft, I found what I was looking for. A PowerPoint file titled Adaptive Optimization Initiative, E. Jackson. My hands trembling slightly, I opened the document. Slide after slide detailed my technology, sometimes using the exact language I'd used in my notes. But every mention of development credited Ethan Jackson as the innovator and architect. The final slides outlined a commercialization strategy with Ethan leading a new division built around the technology. The Betrayal was breathtaking in its boldness. Ethan wasn't just trying to take credit for my work, he was attempting to build his future at the company on my innovation. And somehow, he had convinced Thomas to support him, or at least look the other way. As I sat there staring at the screen, an email notification popped up. The board presentation had been rescheduled, moved up by a week, and my name was nowhere on the attendee list. I barely slept that night, cycling through disbelief, anger, and fear. By morning, one thing was clear. I needed to protect myself and my work. Thomas, the mentor I had trusted for years, was either complicit in his son's theft or willfully blind to it. Either way, I couldn't count on his support. My first step was to thoroughly document everything. I spent the weekend creating a detailed timeline of my research, gathering every email, meeting note, and progress report related to the adaptive optimization project. Fortunately, I had been meticulous about documentation throughout the development process, partly because of my natural tendency toward organization, but also because Thomas himself had always emphasized its importance. In technology, your paper trail is your protection, he had told me years ago. The irony of using his advice to protect myself from him wasn't lost on me. Monday morning, I approached Diane, a senior engineer who had been with TechVision even longer than I had. She was nearing retirement and had always been straight with me. More importantly, she had no particular loyalty to Ethan, having made her distaste for his management style clear on several occasions. "I need some advice," I told her, carefully explaining the situation without making direct accusations. Diane listened intently, her expression growing more troubled. When I finished, she leaned forward. "You need to talk to a patent attorney, Christina." "Right away. But all my work belongs to TechVision," I pointed out. "I developed it as an employee." "That's not entirely true," Diane replied. "As the inventor, you have rights, even if the company has ownership interest. And if they're trying to remove you from the picture entirely, that raises serious legal questions." She handed me a business card. "Call Lauren Decker. She specializes in intellectual property and has helped several engineers I know. Don't use your work phone or email." That afternoon, I called Lauren from my personal cell during lunch at a cafe 2 blocks from the office. She agreed to meet me the following evening. Lauren's office was in a converted brownstone in Cambridge, far enough from TechVision's downtown Boston location that I was unlikely to run into colleagues. She was younger than I expected, perhaps in her early 40s, but her sharp questions and quick grasp of technical concepts immediately put me at ease. "Based on what you've told me, we need to act quickly," she said after I'd explained the situation. "Inventor rights are complex, especially in an employment context, but the fact that they're trying to exclude you entirely from credit gives us leverage." "What should I do?" I asked. "First, we'll file a provisional patent application immediately with you listed as the inventor. That establishes a date of invention. Then we'll need to document any attempts to exclude you or misattribute the work." "Won't filing a patent be seen as a hostile action by the company?" Lauren fixed me with a steady gaze. "Christina, they're already being hostile toward you. This isn't about being nice. This is about protecting your rights and your career. If they launch this technology with Ethan as the claimed inventor, and you do nothing, your contribution will be erased. Worse, if you ever try to claim credit later, they could accuse you of stealing from them." The reality of my situation hit home. This wasn't just about credit for a project. This was about my entire professional reputation and future. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. At work, I maintained a facade of normal activity, continuing to refine aspects of the technology while carefully documenting everything. Outside of work, I met with Lauren and her team multiple times, preparing patent filings and building a case. Meanwhile, the atmosphere at TechVision grew increasingly tense. Ethan began appearing in our department regularly, often huddled in conversation with the other team leads. Thomas, who had previously stopped by my office several times a week, now barely acknowledged me in the hallways. In project meetings, I found my input increasingly dismissed or interrupted. Twice, I arrived to find meetings related to my work had been rescheduled without my knowledge. My team members, sensing the shift in dynamics, began to distance themselves, afraid of being caught in whatever corporate drama was unfolding. A junior developer named Zach, who had worked closely with me on the algorithms testing phase, caught up with me in the parking garage one evening. "I just wanted you to know," he said nervously, glancing around to ensure we were alone. "Ethan asked me to transfer all the testing data and results to his team yesterday. When I mentioned that you should be consulted first, he said the project priorities had changed and you were being reassigned soon." I thanked Zach for the information, maintaining my composure until I reached my car. Reassigned. They were laying the groundwork to push me out entirely. The next morning, an updated calendar invitation appeared in my inbox. The board presentation, originally scheduled with me as the presenter, had been completely removed from my calendar. In its place was a new invitation, titled Project Transition Meeting, scheduled for the day after the board presentation, with only Thomas, Ethan, and the HR director listed as attendees. The message couldn't have been clearer. They planned to present my technology to the board without me, then remove me from the project entirely. The question was whether they planned to reassign me to another department or push me out of the company altogether. That afternoon, I checked the shared calendar and found the board presentation had been updated. It was now titled Strategic Innovation Initiative Presentation, with Ethan listed as the sole presenter. Clicking on the attached agenda, I saw my technology, described as proprietary adaptive optimization technology, developed under the leadership of Ethan Jackson. I forwarded the agenda to my personal email and immediately called Lauren. "They're making their move," I told her. "The board presentation is next Wednesday." "We'll be ready," Lauren assured me. "The provisional patent application will be filed by Friday. After that, we can decide on next steps based on how they proceed." As I ended the call, a notification popped up on my screen. Thomas had just sent out a company-wide email announcing an exciting new technological breakthrough that would be revealed to the board next week, positioning TechVision at the forefront of the industry. The breakthrough that I had created that was about to be stolen from me in plain sight. The Tuesday morning before the board presentation dawned bright and clear, a beautiful New England fall day that belied the storm waiting for me at the office. I had just settled at my desk with my coffee when my office door flew open without a knock. Ethan strode in, his face flushed with what appeared to be righteous anger. Thomas following behind with a grave expression. "We need to talk, right now," Ethan said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. Before I could respond, he slapped a folder on my desk. "Want to explain these?" he demanded, flipping it open to reveal photos. My stomach dropped as I recognized myself in the images, sitting across from Lauren at a cafe near her office. "You've been meeting with North Star Technologies," Ethan accused, naming one of our biggest competitors, planning to sell our proprietary technology right out from under us. The accusation was so absurd that for a moment I couldn't even formulate a response. "That's not North Star," I finally managed. "That's not what you think." "Save it, Ethan. Cut me off. We have multiple photos of you meeting with them over the past 2 weeks. Did you really think we wouldn't find out? That we wouldn't protect ourselves from corporate espionage?" I looked to Thomas, expecting him to be at least somewhat skeptical of these wild accusations. Instead, his face showed only disappointment and anger. "Christina, we found evidence that you've been transferring company files to personal storage and meeting with our direct competitors," Thomas said, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. "After 8 years, I never thought you would betray this company, betray my trust, like this." "That's not what happened," I insisted, feeling a growing sense of panic. "I can explain who I was meeting with." "You'll have that opportunity with our legal team," Thomas replied. "For now, you're being suspended pending termination for violation of your confidentiality agreement and breach of company trust. Security will escort you to HR to process the paperwork." As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared in my doorway. 8 years of building my career at this company, and it was ending with me being treated like a criminal. "You can't just take my work and pretend it's yours," I said to Ethan, anger finally breaking through my shock. Ethan's expression shifted to something like mock pity. "Your work? You mean the company's work that you were trying to sell to North Star?" "I don't think you're in a position to make accusations, Christina." Thomas wouldn't meet my eyes as the security guard stepped forward. "Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be," he said quietly. In a daze, I was escorted to the HR department, where Janice, the HR director, was waiting with termination paperwork already prepared. As she slid the documents across the desk, her professionally detached demeanor slipped for just a moment, revealing what seemed like genuine regret. "I'm required to remind you that all intellectual property developed during your employment belongs exclusively to TechVision, she recited. Any attempt to use, share, or claim ownership of company technology will result in immediate legal action. You're also bound by the non-disclosure and non-compete agreements you signed upon employment. I signed the papers mechanically, still trying to process how thoroughly Ethan had orchestrated my downfall. Not only had he stolen my work, but he had manufactured evidence to paint me as the thief. You have 20 minutes to collect personal items from your desk, Janice continued. A security officer will accompany you. All electronic devices must be surrendered before you leave the building. As I walked back to my office with a security guard trailing uncomfortably behind me, I passed colleagues who quickly averted their eyes. Word had already spread. In their minds, I wasn't just leaving, I was leaving in disgrace. Back in my office, I mechanically packed photos and a few personal items into a cardboard box. My mind was racing, trying to determine how Ethan had discovered my meetings with Lauren. Had I been followed? Was it just luck that he had spotted me? Either way, he had twisted the truth into a weapon against me. As I emptied my desk drawer, my fingers brushed against something taped to the underside. Careful to keep my movements hidden from the security guard, I discreetly retrieved what turned out to be a thumb drive I had never seen before. I slipped it into my pocket without examining it further. At the lobby, I handed over my company laptop, badge, and phone. Thomas was noticeably absent from this final humiliation. 8 years of mentorship, apparently worth less than protecting his son's scheme. Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my car for several long minutes, hands shaking on the steering wheel. A text message arrived from an unknown number. So sorry about what happened. It's not right. Check your personal email. It was unsigned, but I recognized the writing style as belonging to Zach, the junior developer who had warned me earlier. That evening, in the safety of my apartment, I plugged in the mysterious thumb drive. It contained a folder labeled EJ Project, and within it, dozens of emails and document files. As I opened them one by one, the full scope of Ethan's deception unfolded before me. There were emails between Ethan and several board members, dating back nearly a month, promoting his breakthrough technology, strategy documents outlining how to transition the adaptive optimization project away from my team. Most damning of all, an email from Ethan to a private investigator requesting surveillance on me after I had begun meeting with Lauren, speculating that I might be planning to cause problems regarding the technology. The final document was a presentation slide showing a timeline for the Strategic Innovation Initiative with a note in the margin that read, "Confirm CM termination before board presentation. No loose ends. I had been right all along." This wasn't opportunistic credit stealing. This was a calculated plan to push me out and claim my work. And now I had proof. With hands still shaking, but now from anger rather than shock, I forwarded everything to Lauren with a simple message. They just fired me, and I have evidence. Her reply came within minutes. Don't delete anything. Come to my office first thing tomorrow. This changes everything. Lauren's office was already bustling with activity when I arrived at 8 the next morning. She introduced me to 2 other attorneys from her firm who specialized in intellectual property and employment law. We filed your provisional patent application yesterday, Lauren said, sliding a document across the desk to me. Just in time, it seems. Will that be enough? I asked, the emotional toll of the previous day still weighing on me. By itself? No, Lauren admitted. But combined with the evidence you provided, we have a strong case. What they've done goes beyond intellectual property theft. The manufactured evidence to justify your termination, the surveillance, the coordinated effort to remove you from the project you created, these are all legally actionable. Over the next 3 hours, we developed a strategy. The provisional patent established my claim as inventor, regardless of TechVision's eventual ownership rights. The emails and documents from the thumb drive provided evidence of fraudulent behavior and potentially illegal tactics to discredit me. Here's what happens next, Lauren explained. First, we prepare for Ethan's board presentation today. If he presents your technology as his own invention, as we expect, that gives us additional evidence of fraudulent behavior. How will we know what happens in the presentation? I asked. We already have a source, she smiled. Your colleague Zach reached out to us this morning. He's been added to the technical support team for the presentation and is willing to provide details. I felt a wave of gratitude for Zach's courage. Won't that put his job at risk? We've advised him on how to protect himself, Lauren assured me. Now, once we confirm what happens at the board meeting, we'll send a formal cease and desist letter to TechVision, Thomas, and Ethan personally. We'll demand immediate correction of the inventorship records, acknowledgement of your role, and compensation for wrongful termination. Will they comply? I asked skeptically. Almost certainly not, Lauren admitted. But that's just the opening move. The real leverage comes from the evidence of their misconduct. No company wants a public legal battle that includes allegations of fraud and falsification of records. The plan continued to unfold over the following days and weeks. The cease and desist letters went out as planned, prompting an immediate and aggressive response from TechVision's legal team, denying all allegations and threatening countersuits if I pursued the matter. Meanwhile, financial reality set in. Legal battles are expensive, and while Lauren had agreed to take my case on a contingency basis, my savings would only last so long without a salary. I began applying for positions at other tech firms, but quickly discovered another problem, one that Ethan had likely anticipated. The industry in Boston was small, and word had spread about my termination for cause. Several promising interviews went cold once the companies did their background checks. They've effectively blackballed you, Lauren observed grimly when I shared my job search difficulties. This strengthens our case for damages, but doesn't help your immediate financial situation. The stress took its toll. I lost sleep, lost weight, and found myself doubting my decision to fight back. Would it be easier to just walk away, move to another city, start over? During one particularly low moment, I called Lauren to suggest we consider a quick settlement that would at least allow me to pay my bills. Before you make that decision, Lauren said, there's something you should see. That afternoon, I met her at her office, where she introduced me to Alan Rhodes, a forensic data analyst her firm had hired. I've been examining the documents and emails from the thumb drive, Alan explained, bringing up several files on his laptop. Ethan was thorough in covering his tracks within the company systems, but he made a critical mistake. The timestamps on several key files were manually altered to make it appear he had been developing the technology for months. He pointed to a document property field. See this creation date? March 15th. But look at the metadata embedded in the file. He opened a code view of the document. The actual creation date is coded here, October 2nd, just 3 days after your meeting with Thomas where you shared your breakthrough. One by one, Alan showed similar discrepancies across multiple documents. Ethan had created an elaborate paper trail, but the technical forensics told a different story. This is the smoking gun, Lauren said. File timestamps can be easily manipulated, but document metadata is much harder to fake consistently. He created backdated documents to support his claim as the inventor. Our case strengthened further when Zach provided an audio recording of a conversation between Ethan and a board member following the presentation, where Ethan admitted to finding my work and improving it, while planning to handle any potential claims I might make. Just as we were building momentum, I received an unexpected email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line simply read, "You deserve to know." The body contained a single sentence, "I can provide more evidence about what they did to you," followed by a phone number. After consulting with Lauren, I called the number and found myself speaking with Carol, Thomas's executive assistant of 15 years. "What happened to you wasn't right," she said, her voice tense. "I've worked for Thomas since before TechVision became successful. He was always tough but ethical. Until Ethan came back and started pushing for a bigger role." Carol explained that she had been present for conversations between Thomas and Ethan about my technology. Initially, Thomas had resisted Ethan's suggestion that he should present the work, insisting that I deserved the credit. But Ethan had worn him down, playing on Thomas's desire to see his son succeed and concern about his own legacy as he approached retirement. The final straw was when Ethan convinced Thomas that you were planning to leave for a competitor and take the technology with you, Carol said. He manufactured evidence, showed Thomas photos of your meetings. Thomas wanted to believe his son, over facing the truth. Are you willing to provide a statement about this? I asked. There was a long pause. Yes, she finally said. Thomas isn't the man I thought he was if he can do this to someone who was loyal to him for 8 years. I'm retiring next year anyway, so what can they do to me? With Carol's statement, Alan's forensic evidence, and the recorded conversations Zach had provided, Lauren felt we were ready to escalate. The next phase of our plan was timed to coincide with TechVision's big moment, the Tech Futures Conference in San Francisco, where Ethan was scheduled to formally unveil his adaptive optimization technology to the industry. They've invested too much in this narrative to back down now, Lauren explained. The conference presentation will be the most public, irrefutable example of their misappropriation, and we'll be there to challenge it directly. As the conference approached, I received a surprising phone call from Thomas himself. His tone was markedly different from our last encounter, alternating between conciliatory and threatening. Christina, this has all gone too far, he began. I understand you're upset about the project reassignment, but these allegations are damaging the company and your professional reputation. Project reassignment? I echoed incredulously. You fired me based on false accusations after stealing my work. That's a very serious allegation, Thomas said, his voice hardening. One that would be difficult to prove and costly to pursue. I'm calling to offer you a way forward. We're prepared to offer a severance package, a positive reference, and a consultant role acknowledging your contribution to the project. The offer was both insulting and revealing. They were worried enough to try buying me off, but not honest enough to fully acknowledge what they'd done. I'll have my attorney review any written offer, I replied neutrally. Think carefully before continuing this fight, Christina, Thomas warned. Ethan may have been overzealous in protecting company interests, but dragging this into a public legal battle won't help anyone, especially you. After sharing the conversation with Lauren, we agreed the call was a positive sign, an indication that our strategy was working, that they were feeling pressure. But we had no intention of accepting a token settlement that would still allow them to claim credit for my work. As the Tech Futures Conference approached, my determination solidified. This wasn't just about credit for a single invention anymore. This was about standing up against a type of corporate misconduct that likely happened to others who lacked the evidence or resources to fight back. If Thomas and Ethan succeeded in stealing my work and pushing me out, they would do it again to someone else. I packed my bags for San Francisco, mentally preparing for the confrontation to come. Whatever happened at the conference would be a turning point, one way or another. The Tech Futures Conference occupied the entire San Francisco Convention Center, with thousands of attendees from across the tech industry. I arrived early, my heart pounding as I collected my attendee badge. Lauren and her associate Mark waited near the entrance, our plan carefully coordinated. Ethan's presentation is scheduled for 2 o'clock in the main hall, Lauren confirmed, checking the conference program. We've reserved seats in the front section. Remember, our goal is to create a record of public misrepresentation that strengthens our case, not to create a scene that makes you look unprofessional. I nodded, though my churning stomach made it hard to focus. Somewhere in this massive venue, Thomas and Ethan were probably making final preparations, completely unaware that I was here. The thought gave me a small measure of satisfaction. We spent the morning attending other sessions, maintaining a low profile. I wore a conference cap and kept to less crowded areas to minimize the chance of being recognized by any TechVision employees who might be present. At lunch, Lauren's phone buzzed with a text from Zach. Ethan just finished his rehearsal, she read. Thomas is with him. They've got marketing materials all prepared with Ethan listed as chief architect and inventor of the adaptive optimization system. How's Ethan handling the technical details? I asked, knowing that for all his business acumen, he lacked the deep technical understanding of the algorithm I had developed. Zach says he's sticking to high-level descriptions in business applications, Lauren replied. He's apparently delegated the technical questions to one of your former team members, Drew. I felt a fresh pang of betrayal. Drew had worked closely with me for years. Now, he was helping perpetuate this fraud? Then again, from his perspective, siding with the company's leadership was the safer career move. As 2 o'clock approached, we made our way to the main hall, where hundreds of people were already taking their seats. A large screen displayed the TechVision logo alongside the presentation title, Revolutionary Adaptive Optimization, the Future of Manufacturing Intelligence. We took our seats just as the lights dimmed. The company's marketing director appeared on stage to introduce the presentation, describing it as a groundbreaking innovation that will redefine the industry. Then, to enthusiastic applause, Ethan strode confidently to the podium, with Thomas taking a seat in the reserved section at the front. "Thank you all for being here today," Ethan began, his polished delivery betraying no hint of the deception behind his words. "I'm excited to share with you a technology that represents over a year of intensive development and that I believe will transform how we think about manufacturing systems. For the next 20 minutes, I watched in silent fury as Ethan presented my work as his own, using slides that contained diagrams I had created and concepts I had developed. He smoothly described the business applications and market potential, occasionally gesturing to Drew when technical questions arose from the audience. During the Q&A session, Lauren nudged me gently. "Now," she whispered. I stood and moved to one of the audience microphones positioned in the aisle. Ethan, seeing someone approach the microphone, nodded in my direction, not yet recognizing me with my cap still on. "We have time for one more question," he said, pointing to me. I removed my cap as I spoke, making sure my voice was steady and clear. "My question relates to the core algorithm's approach to multivariable optimization under conditions of uncertainty. Could you explain how you developed the solution to the recursion problem that previously limited this type of system?" The color drained from Ethan's face as he recognized me. His eyes darted to his father in the front row, who had turned around and was now staring at me with a mixture of shock and alarm. "Christina," Ethan managed, quickly trying to regain his composure. I wasn't aware you would be attending." "I'm very interested in hearing about your development process," I continued calmly, "particularly since I spent 18 months solving that specific recursion problem before you presented the solution as your own." A murmur rippled through the audience. Ethan's confident demeanor cracked further. "That's a very technical question that Drew can probably address better," he said, gesturing desperately to Drew in the front row. Drew reluctantly approached the stage, looking profoundly uncomfortable. "The recursion issue was addressed through a novel application of dynamic programming techniques," he began vaguely. "Specifically?" I pressed, "because I recall using a modified Thompson sampling approach with adaptive learning rates. Is that the approach you're referring to?" Drew's face flushed. He knew I was the only one who fully understood the solution, having developed it myself. "Yes, that's consistent with the approach," he mumbled. By now, the audience was fully aware that something unusual was happening. Journalists in the press section were taking notes furiously. "One follow-up question," I said. "When exactly did you begin development of this technology, Mr. Jackson? Your marketing materials suggest early last year, but I'm curious about the specific timeline." Ethan had recovered enough to attempt damage control. "This isn't the appropriate forum for whatever personal grievance you might have, Miss Montgomery. We can discuss this privately." "I believe it is the appropriate forum when you're publicly claiming credit for technology you didn't develop," I replied clearly. "I'm simply asking when you began your work on it." Thomas suddenly stood up. "This presentation is concluded," he announced sharply. "We apologize for the interruption and will be happy to answer technical questions at our booth in the exhibition hall." As attendees began to file out, many were already on their phones or huddled in small groups, clearly discussing the unexpected confrontation they had just witnessed. Several journalists approached me, but Lauren smoothly intercepted them, handing out her business cards. "My client will be making a statement shortly," she informed them. "This is a case of intellectual property misappropriation and wrongful termination that we're currently pursuing legally." Across the room, I could see Thomas and Ethan in heated discussion, occasionally glancing in my direction. Their carefully orchestrated moment of triumph had been derailed, and judging by the expressions on their faces, they knew it. As we left the hall, Lauren's phone began ringing. "Interesting," she said, checking the caller ID. "It's Jacob Winters, TechVision's lead counsel." She took the call, listening more than speaking, then ended with, "We'll consider it and get back to you tomorrow." "What did he say?" I asked anxiously. "They want to meet. Tonight." Lauren's expression was cautiously optimistic. "They're suddenly very interested in discussing a resolution." The confrontation had clearly hit its mark, but what surprised me was how quickly the situation continued to evolve. Within hours, my phone was flooded with messages and emails from industry contacts who had been at the presentation or heard about it. The tech community was small, and word traveled fast. Most surprising was an email from Carolyn Mathers, CEO of Integra Systems, one of TechVision's largest clients. "I was in the audience today," she wrote. "Very interested in hearing more about your adaptive optimization technology from its actual creator. Would you be available for coffee tomorrow morning?" Similar messages came from representatives of 3 other companies, all expressing interest in meeting with me rather than continuing discussions with TechVision. The industry was already shifting its attention to me as the true innovator. That evening, Lauren and I met Thomas and Ethan, along with their legal team, in a private conference room at their hotel. The atmosphere was tense, with none of the confident bluster Ethan had displayed at the presentation hours earlier. "This situation has gotten out of hand," Thomas began, looking tired and drawn. "We're prepared to discuss a settlement that acknowledges Christina's contributions to the project." "Contributions?" Lauren echoed. "Our evidence clearly establishes that Miss Montgomery was not just a contributor, but the sole inventor of the technology Mr. Jackson claimed to have developed." "That's a matter for discussion," TechVision's lawyer interjected smoothly. "No, it's a matter of fact," Lauren countered. "We have forensic evidence of document tampering, sworn statements from TechVision employees about the deliberate effort to remove Miss Montgomery from the project, and now a public record of Mr. Jackson being unable to answer basic technical questions about technology he claims to have invented." She laid out our terms: public acknowledgement of me as the sole inventor, compensation for wrongful termination, and a licensing agreement that would give me ongoing royalties from any commercialization of the technology. "That's completely unreasonable," Ethan sputtered, but Thomas silenced him with a sharp look. "We need time to consider your proposal," Thomas said carefully. As we left the meeting, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. Thomas had been my mentor for 8 years, someone I had trusted and admired. Seeing him reduced to damage control, protecting a son who had betrayed those same values, was more painful than I had expected. The next morning brought another surprise. My meeting with Carolyn Mathers from Integra Systems turned into an informal job interview. "We've been following your work for some time," she admitted. "When the adaptive optimization technology was announced, we were intrigued. After yesterday's revelation, we're even more interested in bringing that expertise in-house, with the actual inventor at the helm." By noon, news broke on industry websites about the Tech Futures presentation controversy. The articles carefully avoided making direct accusations, but clearly outlined the dispute over the technology's origin and my public challenge to Ethan's claims. As Lauren and I prepared for a second meeting with TechVision's team, scheduled for that evening, her phone rang again. This time, it was Carol, Thomas's assistant. "You should know," she said without preamble. "Thomas and Ethan had a massive argument after your meeting yesterday. Thomas finally checked the evidence himself instead of taking Ethan's word. He's livid about being misled." When we arrived for the evening meeting, the shift in dynamics was immediately apparent. Ethan was conspicuously absent, and Thomas looked like he had aged years overnight. "I've reviewed the documentation and spoken with several employees," he began heavily. "It appears I was misinformed about certain aspects of the technology's development." For the next hour, negotiations proceeded with a new tone. TechVision's lawyers were still protective of the company's interests, but Thomas himself seemed determined to find a resolution that acknowledged the truth, regardless of the cost to his son's reputation. By the end of the meeting, we had the framework of an agreement: I would be acknowledged as the sole inventor on all patents and publications. TechVision would retain commercialization rights but pay substantial royalties. The company would issue a public statement correcting the record about the technology's development. And most importantly, the false allegations that led to my termination would be formally retracted. As the lawyers worked out the details, Thomas asked to speak with me privately. In a quiet corner of the room, he looked at me directly for the first time since this ordeal began. "I failed you, Christina," he said simply. "I let my desire to see my son succeed blind me to what was happening. I should have trusted the person I had worked with for 8 years over someone who was telling me what I wanted to hear. I had imagined this moment of vindication for weeks, but now that it had arrived, I felt no triumph, only a complicated mix of relief, lingering anger, and unexpected compassion for a man facing the painful reality of his son's dishonesty. "What will happen to Ethan?" I asked. "He'll face consequences," Thomas replied grimly. "The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. His future at TechVision is uncertain at best, as is mine, to be honest." As we prepared to leave, news alerts appeared on everyone's phones simultaneously. An industry blog had published a more detailed account of the dispute, including statements from anonymous TechVision employees confirming my role as the technology's inventor. The story was spreading beyond the conference, beyond the industry insiders who had witnessed the confrontation. It was becoming public knowledge. In that moment, I realized that while the legal battle was reaching resolution, the real impact of this confrontation would continue to ripple outward, affecting careers, relationships, and perhaps even changing how companies handled intellectual property and attribution. The truth had finally emerged, and there would be no going back for any of us. The weeks following the Tech Futures conference unfolded in ways I could never have predicted when I first discovered Ethan's attempt to steal my work. The settlement with TechVision was finalized within 10 days, acknowledging me as the sole inventor of the adaptive optimization technology, providing substantial financial compensation for wrongful termination, and establishing a royalty arrangement for future commercialization. The company issued a carefully worded public statement that, while avoiding direct admission of wrongdoing, clearly identified me as the technology's creator and architect. Industry publications picked up the story, many framing it as a cautionary tale about proper attribution and the risks of intellectual property disputes. The internal fallout at TechVision was even more dramatic than I had anticipated. An emergency board meeting resulted in Ethan's immediate removal from the company. Thomas, taking responsibility for the failure of oversight, announced his early retirement, effective in 3 months. Carol, Thomas's assistant who had provided crucial evidence, contacted me a week after the settlement. "The board has launched a full internal investigation," she told me. "They're reviewing all major projects from the past year to ensure proper attribution and documentation." The personal and professional aftermath was complex and multifaceted. While the legal victory and public vindication were satisfying, I found myself at a crossroads. The settlement provided financial security. But what about my future career path? I had multiple job offers to consider, including the one from Integra Systems that had emerged during the conference. But something about simply stepping into another corporate role didn't feel right after everything I had experienced. During a long conversation with Lauren, who had become something of a friend through our intense collaboration, I shared my uncertainty. "I keep thinking about other engineers or developers who might face similar situations without the evidence or resources to fight back," I told her. "You're in a unique position now," Lauren observed. "You have visibility, credibility, and a compelling story. That creates opportunities beyond just taking another job." Her words crystallized something that had been forming in my mind. 2 weeks later, I made my decision. Rather than accepting any of the job offers, I would start my own company, focused on developing and commercializing advanced adaptive systems with a strong emphasis on proper attribution and ethical intellectual property practices. The announcement of Montgomery Adaptive Systems generated immediate interest from investors and potential clients. 3 former TechVision colleagues, including Zach and 2 senior engineers who had grown disillusioned with the company's direction, asked to join my venture. 4 months after the conference confrontation, I met Thomas for coffee. He had completed his retirement transition and looked both older and somehow more at peace than when I'd last seen him. I wanted to apologize again, properly, he said after we'd settled at our table, and to let you know that I'm proud of what you're building now. How's Ethan? I asked, surprising myself with the genuine concern in my voice. Thomas sighed, humbled, finally. The board's investigation found other instances where he had taken credit for team members' work, though nothing as egregious as what he did to you. He's doing some consulting work now, but the experience has forced him to reconsider a lot of things. We're working on rebuilding our relationship on more honest terms. And what about you? I asked. Any regrets about retiring? A small smile crossed his face. Only that I didn't do it sooner, on my own terms. But I'm keeping busy. I've joined the board of a nonprofit focused on STEM education for underrepresented groups, trying to use whatever wisdom I've gained, including from my mistakes, to help the next generation. As our conversation continued, I realized that this resolution felt more complete than any court victory or financial settlement could have provided. Thomas had been an important mentor to me for years before Ethan's scheming drove a wedge between us. The fact that he had ultimately recognized the truth and taken responsibility mattered. My new company grew rapidly over the next year. The adaptive optimization technology that had been at the center of the dispute became just one component of our expanding portfolio. We developed a reputation not just for technical excellence, but for a corporate culture that emphasized ethical practices and proper recognition of contributors. At the 1-year anniversary of Montgomery Adaptive Systems, we received notice that our core technology had been nominated for the Levinson Innovation Award, one of the industry's highest honors. The irony wasn't lost on me that this was the same recognition Thomas had once told me he hoped to achieve before retirement. The awards ceremony was held in New York, with representatives from across the tech industry in attendance. As I stood at the podium accepting the award, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me there. This technology was born during a difficult period, I told the audience. A time when I learned painful but valuable lessons about standing up for myself and my work. But it also taught me about the power of persistence, the importance of documentation, and the courage it takes to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. I scanned the crowd and spotted Zach and my other team members, Lauren and her colleagues, and even Thomas, who had been invited as a guest of one of the judges. I believe that innovation thrives best in environments where contribution is properly recognized and credited, where merit determines advancement, and where ethics aren't sacrificed for expediency, I continued. That's the kind of company I've tried to build, and the kind of industry I hope we can all create together. The applause that followed felt like the final closure on a chapter that had begun with betrayal, but ended with triumph and transformation. As I returned to my seat, a young female engineer approached me. I followed your story from the beginning, she said hesitantly. It gave me the courage to speak up when something similar started happening in my company. Would you have time to talk sometime about how to navigate these situations? That conversation was the first of many. In addition to running my growing company, I began mentoring young engineers, particularly women in tech, who often faced additional challenges in getting proper recognition for their work. I developed a workshop on intellectual property rights for employees that several companies adopted as part of their onboarding process. Thomas and I gradually rebuilt a different kind of professional relationship. He occasionally served as an advisor to Montgomery Adaptive Systems, bringing his decades of experience without the complications of direct authority. He never mentioned Ethan during our professional interactions, maintaining a careful separation between personal and business matters. 18 months after starting my company, I was invited back to TechVision as part of an industry panel on innovation. The company had undergone significant changes, with new leadership committed to reforming the culture that had enabled Ethan's behavior. Walking through those familiar hallways felt surreal, a journey back to the place where both my greatest professional challenge and ultimately my greatest opportunity had begun. As I sat on the panel, Looking out at the audience of Tech Vision employees, I spotted several familiar faces, including Drew, who had reluctantly supported Ethan's deception at the conference. His expression was a complex mix of shame and respect when our eyes met briefly. After the panel, he approached me hesitantly. "I should have spoken up," he said simply. "I knew it was your work." "Fear is a powerful motivator," I acknowledged. "But so is integrity. I hope you found a better balance between them now." He nodded. "The company's different now, more transparent. Your stand changed things here, probably more than you know." That conversation encapsulated what I had come to understand through this journey, that sometimes fighting back against injustice creates ripples that extend far beyond your own situation. My confrontation hadn't just restored my career and reputation, it had helped change practices at Tech Vision and raised awareness across the industry about the importance of proper attribution and the risks of intellectual property theft. 2 years after that fateful day when Ethan and Thomas had stormed into my office with false accusations, Montgomery Adaptive Systems was recognized as one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the Northeast. Our client list included both industry giants and innovative startups, all drawn to our technical expertise and ethical reputation. The painful experience that had nearly derailed my career had instead launched me on a path I might never have found otherwise, one where I could build something aligned with my own values while helping others protect their contributions. The betrayal had ultimately been transformed into an opportunity for growth, not just for me, but for others who would face similar challenges. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when it seemed like all the odds were stacked against you? The courage to fight for what's right, even when it's difficult, can sometimes lead to unexpected opportunities and growth. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found value in this journey of betrayal, perseverance, and ultimate triumph, please like, subscribe, and share so others can find inspiration too. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember that sometimes what looks like the end of your story is actually just the beginning of a better one.